On planet Earth, an individual would arrive, begin observing people and occasionally fight monsters, indirectly saving humans from those threats. That individual was Nolan, a Viltrumite who was sent to Earth with the mission to find out if reproduction between Viltrumite and human was possible, since the Viltrumite race was on the brink of extinction due to the Scourge virus. One day, while finishing off a monster, a man would descend from a helicopter to meet him. His name was Cecil Stedman, and he had some questions and, above all, a proposal. And so the Viltrumite would become a hero on the planet. Clearly this being a facade, since he couldn't stand human beings, he saw them with repulsion. Their individualism seemed absurd to him. To him, they were just a bunch of animals. That was until one day, while flying, he saw how a monster emerged from the concrete and lifted a car ready to throw it at a woman walking with her pet. Nolan had no real interest driving him to save that woman, but in order to maintain his status and hero facade, he went and saved that woman. While holding the car using just one of his hands, as if it were a toy, he carefully observed the human. To his eyes, she was just another animal, but he had a mission, and the faster he finished it, the faster he'd leave that miserable planet. Time passed, and Nolan established a relationship with that human named Debbie. At first, he was certain that this woman would only fulfill the role of giving him a son, a mere replaceable tool which he could discard at any instant if he so desired. But as he shared more time with that human, something began to grow inside him, a feeling he had never experienced. Love. Little by little, Nolan was enjoying being near that human. He enjoyed the moments they shared, and little by little a doubt grew alongside. How was it possible that he, a Viltrumite rooted and faithful to the Viltrum Empire, would begin to feel things for a simple creature that wouldn't live as long as him? It would be then that his son would be born. Nolan had experienced something new. Now he was a father and couldn't be happier about it. Little Mark would grow up in a home full of love and joy. Nolan's heart each day would become more and more human, and beginning to have hope that his son wouldn't awaken his powers, his blood. He just wanted to have a quiet life with his beloved wife and son, but his greatest fear came true. One night, while sharing a family dinner, his son told him with much enthusiasm that his powers had awakened. It was in that moment that Nolan's world came crashing down. He had been left in shock for a few moments. In his mind, thousands of questions flew. Why now not? This can't be happening. But it was then that a single sentence fell upon the others. Complete your mission. But that thought vanished in an instant upon feeling a slight gesture that his wife Debbie made, to which Nolan reacted and congratulated his son, saying that tomorrow first thing they would begin with his training. That night Nolan couldn't sleep. For the first time in his long life he felt something bad. Anguish. Nolan knew he had a mission. He knew he had an obligation to the Empire, but he couldn't. He didn't want to. Music, but he had to. The next day Nolan trained Mark to later take him to meet Rosenbaum, the person who made Nolan's suit and many other heroes. After thinking about it a bit, Mark decided to ask him to make a suit that would cover him completely. He didn't want his identity as Mark Grayson to be discovered by anyone. Night came. The Guardians of the Globe, the country's greatest heroes, were summoned to all meet at their base, but something wasn't right. It was then that Nolan finished off the Guardians, one by one, without giving them a chance to react. Days passed and Nolan could no longer live with that anguish eating him inside, but neither did he want to end the lifestyle he had carried on Earth for so many years. It was then that he decided to talk to his wife. He told her everything about the Viltrumite Empire, everything about his mission, why he was on that planet in the first place. The Viltrumite was hopeful that his woman would understand him, that she would support him, but on her face he only saw horror drawn. Nolan tried to speak again, but his wife was in denial. She simply couldn't understand what was happening. Nolan took her by the shoulders to explain in more detail, but Debbie didn't want to hear it. She began moving, trying to escape from him. From her mouth only came screams and words of hatred while she hit his chest for him to release her. Nolan became desperate, and in an attempt to keep her still, crack. Debbie's body fell to the floor. Nolan, in his state of anguish, didn't measure his strength and crushed his fragile wife. From one second to another, everything stopped for him. He couldn't hear anything. He couldn't feel anything. Slowly he lowered his gaze, his hands stained by a red liquid, his wife empty on the floor, inert, with a look of fear engraved in her eyes. In Nolan's mind, only one sentence repeated: "This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real." Over and over and over again, until the sound of the door opening behind him made him turn slightly. His son Mark was watching him from the door, frozen by the scene he was witnessing. Nolan tried to speak, but couldn't separate his lips, didn't know what to say. And when he raised his gaze, his eyes met his son's, and he only saw fear and disdain. It was then that the Viltrumite's mind broke. A scream, a cry composed of rage and sadness, was the only thing heard before his son lunged against him, destroying their house in the process. His son hit him with incredible force while questioning what he had done and why he had done it. But Nolan was gone. He made no attempt to defend himself. His son threw him against buildings while hitting him without stopping, but Nolan's gaze was lost. In his mind, only the happy moments he had shared with his family before everything came crashing down repeated. Meanwhile, Mark punched his father in the face and threw him out of the city against a mountain. The The blows and questions didn't stop. Little by little, Mark physically destroyed his father over and over and over again until he got tired. He looked at his father. He was full of bruises and blood, but he could understand he was still alive. It was then that Cecil Stedman arrived on the scene with a group of soldiers, who took Nolan's body, while Cecil stayed with Mark, who only lamented in silence. A few hours later, Nolan would awaken trapped in an underground facility. His arms were trapped, restricting his mobility, a prison from which no human could escape. But Nolan wasn't a human. He had the strength to leave there, but not the will. So he just lowered his head and accepted his new life, while in his mind, he kept remembering the time when he was happy. On the other hand, Mark was sitting on top of a building thinking and questioning why his father had ended his mother's life. But while his mind filled with questions, a green portal opened behind him, from which emerged a man with some questions, and above all, a proposal. Well, that's all for now. Oh, and in case you're wondering, no, there won't be a second part, since I believe the ending explains itself. The full Mask Mark will go to the original Mark's universe to then be banished to the inhospitable universe where they'll forget to animate his skeleton. I'm not real, bro. But if I see this video has enough support, let's say about 500 likes, I'll make a second part. Having as a base that at the moment when Angstrom, Invincible Prime and Mohawk Mark appears to cross the portal along with them. Leave your opinion in the comments. Like the video, subscribe and ring the bell icon.